Okay, so looking at chapter 5, you have the PowerPoint. Follow the PowerPoint more than the textbook for this one because we're not going page by page in the textbook for chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about verbal language. Okay, chapter 6 is going to be about nonverbals, and so these two kind of go hand in hand. But looking at some of the intro to verbal language, there are more than 6,000 languages spoken in the world today. Okay, but about 2,000 of these are spoken by less than 1,000 people. What does that mean? Well, there are probably only about 4,000 to 4,500 that are actually like listed as languages that are there. There are a lot of languages basically with only small tribes or small groups of people. That's really all that's saying, right? I had a report done in last semester. I want to say it was in Chile that there was a language in Chile that only one man spoke fluently, and he was about to die. Like the language is being extinct. So like that one man speaking that one language is probably counted in the 6,000. So there are a lot of languages that are indigenous, that may not have ever been written down, that kind of thing. The top 10 languages in the world, you don't have to memorize these, I'm just going to tell you what they are. And these are first languages, okay? Like English is not listed on here in the top 10 because although almost everybody speaks English, right? It is the most popular second language. It's the global language kind of thing. Mandarin Chinese is the most popular, or has the most number of speakers as a first language. Well, why is that? Well, China has the most people in the world, so it makes sense. Like, if everybody in China speaks that language. Spanish is number 2, based on all of the countries that speak Spanish. Bengali and Hindi are 3 and 4, which are Indian languages. Portuguese is number 5, then Russian, Japanese, German, and then the other Chinese language, Cantonese. So that's pretty interesting. So why do we even have language? All right, so this is normally a topic of discussion, but I want you to think about your answers and we'll talk about it in class. What good is language to us? Why do we have to speak a language? Can we effectively communicate with someone if we don't speak the same language? We can communicate some things, right? But if the question is, can we effectively communicate? It's pretty hard to do that if you don't speak the same language as someone else. The other question that comes up a lot is whether people should be required to learn a second or a third language. In America, we don't really value language learning beyond English. Obviously, if you come to America and you live in America and English is not your first language, we highly value that you learn English, right, as a second language. But if English is your first language, we don't really push the issue. We don't have it in our education system to be a really important factor for, unless you grow up in Texas or California, maybe New York, bigger metropolitan areas. You're not getting language school in elementary school. A lot of private schools do that, but public school systems, I know in Mississippi, language is not required until 2 years of high school language, and then depending on your major in college or at Mississippi College, determines whether or not you have to have 2 years, 12 hours of it. So when should we learn another language? Should we? At what age? Do you want your children to know another language? Do you want to know another language? Those are just kind of questions to ask, like what is the purpose? And we'll talk more about that in class. The study of language is called linguistics. So the definition of the term linguistics is just the study of language. And language breaks down into different parts. Your book focuses on 4 of these. However, in my TESOL classes, there is a class called Applied Linguistics, and we spend the whole semester on these and a few others of what they are. I want to walk through each of them as we go through phonology, semantics, syntax, and pragmatics. So next slide is phonology. I hope to explain this well through the video, but it may need further explanation. I normally have a lot on the board and things like that. Phonology is the sound system of a language. What sounds are in a language, how words are pronounced, which sounds are meaningful. For example, the word is not really meaningful for us. We use it as a filler. We say a lot. Those aren't meaningful sounds. They don't they're just fillers. And which sounds are universal. Some languages, there are some sounds, like is actually a sound in every language. It's a very natural sound, and so it's in every language. But we don't have the same sounds. TH, for example, is not a very common sound outside of English. And in English, we don't roll our R's, right? But the reason the th and the because other languages don't have that, that's why you hear Asian speakers say things like, thank you, right? They say thank you because they don't have the th in their language, so they kind of accommodate for that. Or the French may say, would you like this or that, right? They don't have this, so they say this or that to make up for that sound. There's actually an entire alphabet based on sound. The IPA stands for the International Phonetic Alphabet. The International Phonetic Alphabet, it basically helps people who study language figure out how to pronounce the words correctly. So where we have an alphabet on how to spell, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, there are symbols and pictures, in a sense, in the IPA that each symbol represents sound, not spelling or a letter, but pure sound. Like, this is how you make this A. We need this because some sounds kind of run together. If you look at the PowerPoint, you have grade A and grade A. Two totally different meanings, same sound, right? So if I'm spelling it differently because I mean two different words, or two sets of words. But in the IPA, it would look exactly the same because it's only based on how it sounds. Same way with ice cream and ice cream, or the sun's rays meet and the sun's rays meet. So if you look at those examples there, they sound exactly the same. So if I were to write them in the International Phonetic Alphabet, they would look exactly the same. Look at the sentence on the next slide. Did he believe that Caesar could see the people seize the seas? The silly amoeba stole the key to the machine. Look at all of the underlined, bolded parts of words. What sound do they make? E. They all sound like E, right? Well, in English, look how many different ways we spell that, right? So if I want you to say it like E, this is how it's spelled. Well, that sounds a little silly if you're learning a language because, well, how do I spell E? Well, you can spell it like E or IE or AE or EE or EO or EI or E. You see what I mean? The way English and other languages work is the spelling doesn't tell you how to pronounce it. It can really confuse you. But in the IPA, if you see that symbol on the PowerPoint, that's what we have as a small I. That's actually, the symbol is E. Okay, so in every place that you see this, all of these words would be replaced by E. Okay, to tell you that this is how it sounds. Look at the other word, the next slide. How would you pronounce this word? G-H-O-T-I. G-H-O-T-I. I've had people say gaudy, goatee, goatee, goshi. Any others? Do you want to guess? Or? What if I told you that the word was fish? Based on English spelling, it could be, because GH has the sound in the word enough, right? Enough. And O has the I sound in women. And TI has the sh sound in nation, right? So if I was just using my own spelling rules for phonics, then I could easily just say, well, that's fish, right? And if I wanted it to be fish, I could actually write it in the IPA. Internationally, we use this to spell any word so that I could look at that if that were in French and look at it in the IPA and say, that's fish, right? So I think that's kind of silly, but it's very helpful. It's very helpful whenever someone is trying to learn a new language, make it sound more native-like. If people want to, because the goal of learning a language, you can learn a language just to communicate, right? If I'm going on a trip for a couple of weeks, But if you want to live somewhere else, you want to sound as native as possible, and some of that is this pronunciation thing. Phonics, I don't know if anybody worked on phonics, hooked on phonics, that kind of thing. That's coming from the same idea, phonetics, right? The sounds of words, sounded out. It's that same idea. The second section is semantics. Semantics is the study of meaning. What does the word actually mean? What is a chair? When I asked that question before, I've gotten answers like, it's something you sit on. Okay, well, what is a couch? And can I sit on the ground? So how is chair different from couch or ground? I have this funny thing. There is no egg in eggplant, nor ham in hamburger, neither apple nor pine in pineapple. English muffins weren't invented in England, nor French fries in France. Sweetmeats are candies, while sweet breads, which aren't sweet, are meat. We take English for granted, but if we explore its paradoxes, we find that quicksand works slowly, boxing rings are square, and a guinea pig is neither from Guinea nor is it a pig. And why is it that writers write, but fingers don't think? Grocers don't gross, and hammers don't ham. So it's just this silly idea that how to figure out what something actually means, giving it a full definition, is the study of semantics. What does it mean? What is this word? So I guess, the people who write dictionaries really focus a lot on like the meaning of how sofa is different than couch. And sometimes that's regional. I've had people say a sofa is more formal than a couch, right? Or the sofa goes in the living room and the couch goes in the den, where one's more formal and one's less formal. And then I've had the opposite. Wait, a den is more formal and a living room is, less formal. So those ideas can also go. The other thing about even if you share a language, sometimes the words you use are very different. In England, we have a list on page 138, British English and U.S. English, and how we even share a language, but the definition or the terms that we would use would be different. So, for example, in America, we would say we want to wear a sweater. Well, in England, they say jersey. Well, when I hear jersey, I think you're playing a sport, but they say it's like a sweater. This one I have a true example of. In America, we say underwear. In England, they say pants. When I was in school, when I was a student at Belhaven, there was a girl in my hall who was from Northern Ireland. And it was probably her first week there. I had just gotten an internship at a place downtown, and it was a political internship. So I needed to dress professionally. And so I needed to go shopping, and I asked her if she wanted to go shopping with me. And she's kind of on the fence, and I said, well, I'm just going to go a couple of places. I really need to find some pants. I have a really hard time finding pants that are long enough. Okay, so knowing this, the whole time now, she hears pants and she thinks underwear. So she's like, sure, I'll go with you. And so of course I go to like the pants section, trouser section, right? And I'm trying on different pants and things like this. And at some point she figures out, or it comes to the realization, and we figure out that we're talking about something different. And we just start cracking up because she's thinking, I just could not wait to come and see what kind of underwear Americans wore that needed to be long enough, like to go to work. So it was just really like this whole misunderstanding, but I still laugh about that from today. I'm like, no, I need like trousers. Mm-hmm. And they have some other things, tennis shoes are pumps, but for pumps for us are like heels, right? If you want a cookie, you would call it a biscuit. So, French fries are chips. I remember being a kid, and my parents would go to Captain D's every now and then, and I would always order fish and chips, and they would always give me French fries. And I was so confused, because I was like, I thought I ordered chips. I wanted like chips, which in England they would call crisps. So it's just kind of funny how what does a word mean may not only depend on what language you speak or learning a new language, but even sharing a language with someone else, figuring out those nuances and the differences of that. The third one is syntax. Your book calls it syntactics. I have never heard that outside of this book, and so I call it syntax. So we'll use those interchangeably. I'll accept either. But that's the study of the structure of language. This idea, the blue car smashed the red car. Our subject comes first in English, so we know that the blue car did the action, right? It hit the red car. the meaning would be totally different if we reversed that. The red car smashed the blue car. This has a lot to do with word order, plurals, possessives, gender forms even. In English we say things like that girl's purse, but in other languages they would say things like the purse of the girl. Like they reverse that order. And we usually put the subject at the beginning of the sentence unless you're Yoda. Okay, like Yoda speaks in inverted syntax. Yoda from Star Wars. Maybe how some of you will remember that. Syntax is the structure of your words, the structure of your sentences, and so Yoda basically takes our normal syntax, our normal order of words, and just inverts them. So it's actually called that. So instead of saying, the most recent thing I've heard is, that phrase, you only live once. Yeah, YOLO, you only live once. Well, I saw a shirt with Yoda on it, and it said, only once you live. Right? So like that's taking it and inverting it, and it being inverted syntax. The fourth thing is pragmatics. Pragmatics and semantics usually go together. So 2 and 4, I'm not sure why they're not next to each other here. Semantics is the study of meaning, right? Pragmatics is the study of meaning in context. Okay, so like how a language is used in context. So I can say, she's hot. Semantically, right, in semantics, what does that mean? Well, maybe that means she's attractive. Maybe that means she's warm. Maybe that means she's angry. The context, the pragmatic side of that would probably give more clues into what I actually mean, right? These 2 guys are standing there, girl walks by in short shorts and high heels, and he looks at the other one and goes, hey, she's hot. The sound of the voice, the setting of what's happening, the way he said it, gives the information that he means she's attractive, not she's angry, right? So all of that kind of goes in together. So whatever a word means, it can change based on where you are, who says it, when they say it, time of day, all of that. Who you're talking to, right? It also does other things. Pragmatics is the study of how you give information, controlling others' behaviors, communicating your feelings, greetings. So you study pragmatics when you study other countries and how they greet each other, right? The context of meaning and how and what that means when someone takes their hand and places it on your forehead, when you kiss someone's hand, when you kiss each cheek once, if you just shake hands tightly. That's actually a study in pragmatics. What are you communicating in this context? Sarcasm goes into context a lot. So if I say, are you going to the gym today? And I answer, when pigs fly, I mean no. But if I were just to take the meaning out of the context, I would say, when a pig flies, I will be there. Like I can be really literal. But obviously in that setting, it's just a fast and quirky way to say, heck no, right? Absolutely not. So sarcasm comes into pragmatics as well. Because sarcasm is actually lying a lot of times. It's actually a lie. But we accept it because in the context that it's used, we excuse any negative connotation to that. So here's a question. We take those 4 sections of language that you'll need to know and you'll need to list, what are the 4 aspects of verbal language: phonetics, semantics, syntax, pragmatics, right? And kind of moving on from that, there's a question that we talk about. So we've got somebody's verbal language, what language they speak. And here's my question. You can circle this question, you need to put a star on it, you can do whatever you want, but this question will be on the test. And I'm telling you that because I always tell students that this question is going to be on the test, and at least half of my class gets it wrong. I don't know how, I don't know what I'm not explaining, so I'm going to try again to see what's going on. There's further explanation on page 140 and 141 if you need it, but the question is, how does language influence perception. We've talked about perception, how you see the world around you, what page of the book you're on, kind of thing. According to some studies, language not only expresses ideas, but it shapes ideas about your perceptions of the world. Okay? This is kind of a chicken and the egg question. Do people have a worldview and they create their language from it? Or does language somehow give to a worldview? Or now that language is established in certain cultures, they kind of feed off of each other. One thought is like Alaskan natives, okay? People who live, native Eskimos. Do they have like 6 to 8 or more words for snow and ice, right? We have in Mississippi 1. It's snowing, right? I see something coming that's not rain in the sky. It's cold. It must be snowing. We're so excited if we get just a little bit, on our cars that we can wipe off and make a snowball later. But they have, 8-ish words for snow. Dangerous snow, light snow, heavy snow. And these aren't just like light snow, heavy snow. They're actual vocabulary words for snow. So did the Eskimos create new words because this was their world? Or they had that many words, so they used them based on snow? A couple of examples, and I list these here on the PowerPoint. The Dene people is actually a part of the Navajo tribe. They don't have any possessives in their language, so they don't have a way to say his, hers, ours, yours. They can't say it because they don't have the words there. What do you conclude about them? If they cannot say, imagine a 2-year-old not being able to say, that's mine, right? We could conclude that they value unity, right? That they value group more than individuals, right? Or they may think that it's less important to own things and to have more of a communal approach. This isn't just mine, it belongs to us all. So that idea. Now, after many people are born, generations are born, and they still don't have those words, they're reinstilling that worldview, right? Like, you can't say, this is mine, it's mine, it's mine. Like, you can't say it. So they're kind of placing that worldview based on their language. The Panan people in Borneo, they only have 1 word for he, she, and it, but they have 6 ways to say we. 6 ways to say the word we. Oh, we have y'all and all y'all, but like we. It kind of gives us that mindset or that idea that they really may have a stronger community approach, right? If they can say we 6 different ways. And then in German and Spanish and many other languages, there is a formal and an informal you, right? So you would say you to a superior. Thank you would be a different you than thank you to a classmate. And this is something that we don't have in English. So what does that say about a worldview? Well, it's just the idea of respect, right? There's definitely a hierarchy, a respect for hierarchy, a necessity for hierarchy. I had a student once, and I always use this example because I just loved it. She was a Mexican-American. She was in college. She had been here, I think, 5 or 6 years. She took some high school here. Her English was fantastic, and she raised her hand and gave us an example and said, this comes up a lot because I speak Spanish as a first language, and we have a formal you, and so now I have this job, and every time I see my boss, I feel like I'm being disrespectful to him in English. She said, I feel like I should say something like, can I do anything for thou today? Like she needs to bring in thou and thine because saying just you feels disrespectful because she has 2 different words for you in her language. So this idea of, it may instill some level of respect for elders or respect for positions if your language requires it. So how does language influence perception? The words you speak or the words you're taught as an infant absolutely give way and lay the groundwork for what is important in life, right? So if you have 6 ways to say we, well, you're telling me that community is important. If you have, no possessives, you're telling me that ownership is not important. If you have a formal you, then you're saying that respect is important for elders or for people in a higher position. You see what I'm saying? So how does language influence our perception? It shapes the ideas we have about the world around us. And then those are some of the examples that kind of go in there. The last thing on part 1 of chapter 5 is the cultural variations within language. There are attitudes towards speaking, writing, silence. In the United States, speaking is really highly valued. We really think it's important to articulate your words well. If you want to be someone of importance, you need to be able to communicate well verbally. Okay, so you can be a genius scientist, and you can write thousands of theories, and you can publish books, but you might not get the respect as an expert or as a teacher, even if you go into like a higher education system, if you cannot communicate those things verbally. If you can't give a lecture, if you can't give a presentation, then even though you're a genius, people might not invite you to speak at their events, right? We value the thoughts that you can say through speech. To be a good businessman, to be a good politician, sometimes even in America, we show how much we value speaking because we say things, if it's quiet for a while, we say things like it's an awkward silence, right? So like silence has a negative connotation. Or if you're angry with someone, you may give them the silent treatment, right? To ignore someone is considered negative. So these ideas that in the United States, we really value speaking. That's not true other places. Other cultures place a great deal of value on silence and harmony. Speaking is secondary. The Amish are actually, I don't know, some of you learned this in your cultural group history reports, but the Amish are sometimes called the quiet in the land. So in America, we do have a cultural group that is quiet, that values silence, being the Amish, the quiet in the land. East Asians use this idea of silence as a skill in conversation. So they don't have awkward silences. It's part of the conversation. Turn taking, being quiet before you speak. We tend to expect when our conversation partner is finishing, so that we're right on the tips of it. Like while they're saying something, we're thinking of what we're going to say, and so there's not a lot of space between our turn taking. In other cultures, it's actually more on top of each other. Like it's more common to interrupt or to, I'll be with certain cultural groups, like yesterday in my meeting, and I just kept getting interrupted, and I had to remember that it wasn't a disrespectful thing. It was a way of culturally speaking, right? That's how, if I wanted to get my say in, I could interrupt, right, and it not be rude. The other thing about writing, I do want to make a note of, is that in writing, Americans do value writing in some places, especially these days. In a verbal, a man's word doesn't go so far in an actual agreement anymore, right? In a contract, I want to see it in writing. Shake my hand, take my word. We've lost a lot of that, so now everything has to be in writing. Sign it. Have a notary sign it as well. We really want to see things. So as much as we value speaking, we also value things being in writing. There is one exception to this, and I think it's kind of interesting. We do tend to, in a marriage, an American marriage ceremony, we look at the couple as married when they stand in front of people and they say, I do, right? And they say, and the priest or the judge or pastor says, I now pronounce you husband and wife. In the eyes of everyone there, that's when they got married, when they were pronounced husband and wife. But in the eyes of the law, you still have to sign a document. But we don't make a big deal of that. Like, there are very few weddings that you go to where they have, okay, now we'll all go over here and sign the marriage document. Like now we'll make it official. Tim and I almost forgot to sign our marriage license before we left the ceremony, before we left the reception. You know, they were like, "Oh, come back. Okay, sign it real quick." It wasn't. So that's the one area where we tend to say we value the spoken word, or we view the spoken word as more important than the actual writing. But typically these days we say, "I need to see it in writing." I'm going to end the video on chapter 5 here, because the second part of chapter 5 will be in class with an activity. And so the second part, dealing with the variations of style, these last two slides, they will not be on video, they will be in class.